to begin with, we're going to rewind 40 years. And at this point in your career, Alan, you had made some TV stuff already,
yep.
and you had directed some of the most famous adverts, I think, to have come out of the 1970s, like the Cinzano ads with Joan Collins and Leonard Rossiter, and you know, you made some kind of big stuff in that respect. But this was your first feature film.
It was.
So,
yeah.
so had you packed like the advertising agency and stuff in to do this, or were you still keeping irons in the fire? I mean, had you committed yourself to a career in film at this point?
Not really, no, because I was quite happy doing commercials, and I wrote a script for David Putnam called Melody, which got made, and then I was really into commercial. But I wrote a lot of screenplays that didn't get made, and they kept coming back with this rubber stamp on it, because it was a very depressed time in the British film industry, and it kept saying parochial, too parochial, too parochial, because it was, you know, they were British stories. So I thought, well, I'll write an American story. So just took the two genres, you know, American musical and gangster film, and put them together. And at that time, I had 4 small children of my own. So the idea came from talking to, you know, just telling the story to them, really. That's how it started.
And the whole idea of making the film with children in those roles, for somebody directing their first film, I mean, you must have either been incredibly confident or barking mad, weren't you?
Well, Dexter himself, who is a very accomplished director in his own right now, knows it's really hard working with kids, and you either it's hard having kids in a film where you also have adults, but the whole notion of just having kids was just something that you don't. I mean, I wrote it, and you start it, and it's because you're at the beginning of a career, because you're naive, because you're not really aware of all the pitfalls and all the difficulties of working with kids, because there are, you know, to work with kids at Pinewood Studios, we had a full-time school. They're only allowed under the lights for a certain number of hours, all those things, all the mechanical difficulties, apart from the fact that it was a gigantic cast and all those from all over the world. And so I think, you know, now if you thought of the idea, you go, oh no, I wouldn't bother because it'd be too difficult. But then, because, you know, you're just young and didn't know any different. So people say, oh, you must have been so brave. I said, no, just stupid.
and there's some big challenges in making that film. Not least, you know, was actually working with the kids, but also things like, you know, like the splurge guns, for example. I mean, that's actually probably an easier idea on paper than it is in creating.
It was, you know, the logic being that you couldn't have a gangster film without guns, and you can't have a kids film with guns. So, you know, probably very politically incorrect now even to have them in the thing. But at the time, I came up with this idea with a splurge gun. I was just something that fired a custard pie. And we experimented at Pinewood Studios in those days. There was always these strange kind of sheds with odd people in them, and who made all the props and stuff. And my idea was that we'd have the gun, and the gun would fire a wax pellet. It would be wax, and inside would be shaving cream or whatever, a whipped cream of some kind, and it would be it was propelled by just compressed air, and that was the first prototype, and we built it, and then Alan Marshall, the producer, and Garth Thomas, the production manager.
Wow, Garth Thomas.
Garth Thomas was a huge man.
Yes, yeah.
You were that big, and he was very
very tall. Yeah.
But he was an enormous man, and so Garth stood, and I fired the gun, the prototype, at Garth Thomas, and it hit him on the forehead, and he was about 20 stone, and it knocked him over, and he had a red mark on his forehead.
So it's a good hit.
For at least 6 weeks, he had this red mark. You know, would never go away. And so they said to me, you know, firing these things at children might be a bit dangerous. The whole thing is an illusion. You know, they fire ping pong balls, which, you know, so you cut that bit, and then you cut the arrival of the stuff on the face, and then put them together, and it looks. So it's a film illusion, really, and most of it was, you know, just the prop man or me just throwing handfuls.
Yeah, my brother, who's in the film as well, gets... Where is it? He gets shot in a restaurant with some spaghetti. said it was you behind the camera with a big handful of cream, just throwing cream in his face.
Yeah. I mean, that must
That was
have been
a-
very satisfying, actually, wasn't it?
It
They-
was
they've
some-
been play-
yes.
They were playing up a bit.
I cannot tell you the pleasure I got out of that.
And in terms, I mean, you really spent a lot of time casting this film. I mean, you didn't just look around the UK; you went to America as well. And can you just tell us a little bit about, like, finding Jodie Foster and Scott Baio, and obviously, Dexter and the other guys you found in the UK?
We spent a year preparing it before we even got any money for it, really. But because we were doing TV commercials, that kind of paid for everything, the whole thing. And in fact, even when we were making the film, we built this. We had to build the entire street set inside the studio. Normally you do it on the back lot, but we had to do it inside because we had night shooting, and the hours of shooting with kids at night was so prohibitive that we built it all inside the studio, and we could only afford one side of the set, and also I wanted to raise the set up onto rostrum so that we could have steam coming through in the street as it does in New York, and we couldn't afford that. So because we were doing commercials, Alan Marshall and I went off, and we made a whole series of commercials, and that money paid for the set, for the building and the street.
Wow.
So that was quite handy to have that, be able to do commercials they paid for half of Bugsy Malone basically.
And you went over to New York and LA.
We went in that year. We went all over the UK to begin with. Actually, the most helpful places were the American Air Force bases and the schools, the American kids there. A lot of those kids were in the film. Then I went to New York, and I went to schools in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and that's where I found John Cassisi, who plays Fat Sam. And then I went to the Normal Agents, which is where Scott Baio came in. He had done a few commercials, so he had an agent. So I saw him there in New York, and then I went to Los Angeles also to cast, and that's where I met Jodie Foster, and she was so not interested in my film. She had been cast by Marty Scorsese, who was her hero, in Taxi Driver. So she was much more keen on doing that, really, than coming to do Bugsy. But I think ultimately she enjoyed making Bugsy more when she did afterwards. But yeah, they came from all over, really. And in Harlem I went, the kid who plays Fizzy, Humpty Alvin Johnson, his name was. He came from Harlem. And just as thorough as you could be, really, because it's a film that if you don't, I guess it's the same with all films, really. If you don't get the casting right, you don't get the film right. And it's very specific with regards to kids, really.
And I know that things have changed over 40 years, but when you're working with children, how does it work in terms of, especially if you're bringing children over from America and you have to put them up to stay with a host family or in a hotel, or how does that work? And then obviously education as well.
Well, we had a full-time school for all the English kids, all different ages. The average age was 12. But everybody, we went from, Dexter, you were 9, I think. 9 to Dandy Dan was 15. But the average age was 12. Jodie was 12. Most of the dancers came from up north. So, from Manchester, from Leeds, and Liverpool. And so they had to be put up as well. And to start with, this person we met, the person who got hit with the thing, Garth Thomas, the production manager, he was responsible for finding a place for them all to live while they made the film, and he found the crummiest hotel in the Pinewood vicinity. It was unbelievably dreadful, but it was really cheap, and that's where everybody was going to be billeted. And when the American kids arrived, or more importantly, when their mums arrived, they went no way. So that plan went out the window. So, and Jodie was the only, because Jodie was kind of a big deal, because she'd done a lot of movies, she was at the Holiday Inn. So they all insisted that they wanted to stay at a really fancy hotel. So they all wanted to stay at the Holiday Inn, Thank God it was the Holiday Inn, and not Claridge's or somewhere.
And Dexter, obviously you were already a seasoned performer as well. Certainly you did a lot of stuff in your childhood.
I'd been in some stuff before, but it was mainly sort of walk-on stuff.
So this was your first big break then?
That I recall, it's the first time I had a named part and was saying lines. I mean, I'd done stuff since I was about 5 or 6, here and there. So I was used to being on a set, but no, I had a character name. I was Babyface. But I remember when Alan came to the drama club that I went to as a kid with a big video camera, one of the early big video cameras, and we all were given a scene when Blousey and Bugsy meet, when he's trying to carry her bag. What you got in here? A whole library, some books, and he's trying to. So we all had to do that scene for Alan on the videotape. And then it sort of went from there. But no, it was a big deal, definitely.
We have also got here the actor who played Leroy somewhere, Paul Murphy. Where's Paul? Where's Paul? Is Paul there?
Stand up.
Stand on up. Yeah.
Gosh, he's an old man.
We've retained our youthful look. What happened to you?
Where's your grey hair?
It must be weird for you, Dexter, in a way, because I guess Alan was the authoritarian figure on the set. He was the director. Is it a bit like kind of meeting one of your old teachers when you kind of see Alan, or
I don't know about that. No, I don't think. I mean, it wasn't authoritarian. It felt like we were all sort of. I don't know. Paul probably back me up on this. Is that we was there all having fun, and we were all there for the same reason. It didn't feel like, oh, you have to be careful of how Alan's going to blow up and get angry. Or
that was obviously later then, yeah.
That was later, yeah. No, it was sort of like we're all doing this wonderfully exciting, great thing together, and I think that was part of the skill and success of what Alan did with the kids at that time, is that you felt that he was someone who was communicating with you on your own level and would throw things at you in the immediate that you would just make part of what you were doing. And so, sure, you had your lines to learn, but there was always going to be something that you had to do that wasn't planned, and that very much came from the mind of Alan.
And you've gone on to direct kids yourself in some of your films now.
Yeah.
I mean, have you taken anything from working with Alan?
Well, it harks back to what I'm saying, really, is that one thing that sticks very clearly in my memory of being 9 is there's a line I say in the film, which is, I'm a big movie star now. I look at the camera and I say, I'm a big movie star now. And that was something that Alan just said to me on the day. It sticks very clearly in my mind. He said, right, just look at the camera and say, I'm a big movie star. And I was like, well, that's breaking all the rules, isn't it? Don't look at the camera. It was like the first rule you're told as a kid, don't look at the camera. But it's a great moment. It's very funny and it works brilliantly, but it's very much, I'm sure you just, in that moment, you went, oh, this will be great. And it either works or it doesn't. And it happened to work. And I, when directing kids myself, we were talking about this earlier, is about, there's kids just have this innate ability and you can bring it out of them. And if you get the right kid, but it's about being able to just give them something that keeps it exciting and fresh for them in that moment.
I think the truth is that if you don't get the casting right, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are as a director, you're not going to get an amazing performance out of somebody who doesn't already have it. Yeah. So all you can do really as a director is to create an environment where they can be at their best.
Yeah.
And you can't terrorise them. Sometimes it's no different to grown-up actors, adult actors, is that, as a director, some of the time you're their best friend, sometimes you're a benign uncle, sometimes you're a school teacher, sometimes you're a Gestapo officer. But with kids, you can't do that. If they're scared or if they are not enjoying it, they will not be good.
You did do something in the film which really annoyed Dexter's mum, though.
I did. I shaved off his hair. And it was not shaved, it was a really terrible, very fierce.
It was a bowl cut.
Yeah, and his mum was furious. And she came to the producer, Marshall, and she said, he can't go to school like that. It's just horrible, humiliating. So we had to
I was a very sensitive child.
He was very sensitive. We had to pay for a wig.
Which you're wearing now.
Yeah, it's the same one now.
Ironic, considering his hair now. So he had this wig, and they used to go to school, which was to disguise the fact that he'd had his hair cut. But being Dexter, he used to... What did you do with it?
I ended up sitting in the back of the class, turn it all around on the back of my head. The teacher would look around and all the kids were laughing, and I'd have it on backwards like that. I think I only wore it for one day. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous.
But Paul, I found... I did a kids' TV programme on it. It was one of those Saturday morning things, and I was about to make this film, which is all children, and asked for kids to write in or to try and make the net as wide as possible, really. And then I turned round and there was this this boy sitting behind me, which was Paul Murphy. That's true, isn't it? And I said to him, would you like to be in the film? And he said, oh yes, that's why I'm here. And he was. But the thing is to play to people's strengths, I suppose, really. And then once I had the cast, I kind of rewrote it all a bit for them. And a lot I did improvise, as Dexter said with regards to the babyface. A lot of it was, because I'd written it, I felt free I could change it. Sometimes if it's not your screenplay, you don't feel so free to be able to change things. But I did a lot because the kids themselves were creating their own magic, their own energy, and you go along with that really. And sometimes the things that you've written aren't quite as funny as you think they are, and the things that they're saying automatically are much funnier than you could think of.
There was an enormous sense of fun on the set always. It was always really exciting and fun to be there. It wasn't like work. It was just this amazingly, and that's something that I've tried to emulate with my work as well now. So.
I'm going to get some questions from the audience any moment now, but just before I do that, and you're going to be first, just before I do that, you have been very particular about allowing people to do professional productions of Bugsy Malone, but you've just had a very kind of happy experience with the lyric Hammersmith.
Yeah.
What is it that concerns you? What have been the sort of sticking points about allowing it to be done before?
Well, what I've always allowed, and it's like the most performed school play in this country, which is lovely, I think. I've always encouraged that. When I've tried to do professional productions in the past, they've really never been very good, I thought. I mean, nowadays they look like glorified school plays, and it should be better than that. And the lyric is the first time where they've taken it beyond what it is. They've taken it beyond what the film is, actually. In many ways, it's, there are elements, particularly things like choreography and stuff, which are far superior to the film. And so it worked, there's been a couple of professional West End productions which I've not really liked, The last one, which was about 10 years ago, I remember I took my granddaughter and I had to leave at the interval because I hated it so much. And I said to my granddaughter, I'm going to the pub next door. I'll see you afterwards. And it was in one of those theatres in Shaftesbury Avenue, and as I was walking up the stairs at the interval, sneaking out, the director came in the opposite direction. And I won't use the word that I said, but he said, oh, so what do you think? And I didn't stop walking, I went, rubbish. I didn't actually say rubbish, but...
We can all use our imagination on that one, I think.
Oh, what a good question. Yeah, that's it's really hard for me to say because, I don't know. No, it's like, I know it's a terrible cliche thing, but it's like saying, it's like asking your dad which of his favourite children. Yes, but they're all. I don't know who the funniest. I like them all. I have great affection for all of them. I'm afraid. I don't know. What's your favourite character apart from yours?
My favourite. I rather like Dandy Dan. I find Dan's his coolness very. I find it funny, and Doodle is quite funny as well.
Doodle's very good.
Doodle's very good.
Exactly.
Or even Roxy Robinson. Anyway, Fat Sam's brilliant.
Fat Sam is Fat Sam. Apparently they had a one of those things, when they do documentaries on Where Are They Now, They found Fat Sam, and he's in Brooklyn. He's in the construction business. Ooh, yes. He's not changed at all. I mean, I saw the thing. I didn't meet him in person, but I saw the film, and he's now 40-odd-year-old, same as he was, really. At the time, he had a couple of really, really good albums, actually, and he'd written a lot of songs for other people, and he was very well known. And I went to he was performing in Las Vegas, and I went to Las Vegas to meet with him, and he was always too busy to see me, so I was there for like 3 days in a very fancy hotel suite in Las Vegas. And then I finally did get to meet with him, and we went to this cafe place called Fox's Deli, and I had the script, because when I wrote the script originally, I actually wrote all the songs, and myself. And the producers, Alan Marshall and David Putnam, one day sat me down and I said, right, these are the songs, and I sung all the songs, and there was a silence. And they said, we think we'd better get a professional. So, but the only good thing about me writing all the lyrics that I'd written were about, they were all the songs were placed where they ought to be, and they all said what they had to say. So and then Paul is the most brilliant lyricist, and so he paraphrased. No, that's not really fair, because he took my rubbish lyrics and he made them something very special, and so it started from that. But he had a good blueprint, is what I'm saying, and he seemed to have written all the songs already. And in this cafe place, he just sung these songs. And I said, have you got a tape recorder? I was terrified he would forget them, which he didn't do. And then he was on tour, so we would get these cassettes of the songs, which we had to put into rehearsal 2 weeks before we were shooting it. It was just ludicrous, really. And you had no way of changing it, because we were up against the deadline. We had to start shooting. And like, for instance, Jodie Foster's song arrived, and My Name is Tallulah. And as you know, Jodie's real timbre of her voice is very low. And suddenly this little squeaky voice arrived. And she was horrified by this, because it was nothing like her. But we had to get on and do it. And and in a way, when, in the films that I've done since, where you put so much effort and so much time into that, on Bugsy it just happened, it just arrived, and you had to get on with it, really, and it's when we mixed the final thing, it was 2 tracks, which is, had the band on one track and the voice on the other, and in the same place, like I don't know how many years later when I did Pink Floyd The Wall, where we had 3 24-track machines linked up. It was a totally different exercise, but in a way, because like the whole film was made, really, it was, if you have to get on and do it, then you do quite interesting work. Yeah, good question. Well, we needed cars, and so I came up with the idea of a pedal car, and we made it. It cost a fortune, I remember. Most of our budget went into the car. And it didn't work at all, because no one person... It worked all right with one person in it, but the moment you put people in the back, it wouldn't move. So if you look really carefully, every time you see the cars, there's 3 prop men pushing it. And you can see their feet in a couple of the shots, actually. So it's a big cheat, I'm afraid. Yeah. The actual fight is just once, because I had this beautiful brown Art Deco set at Pinewood, and we did have 3 cameras, and then I said action, and they started to throw the pies and the flour, and in not more than 2 minutes, the set went from brown to complete white. The whole thing was just ruined in no time at all, and all the costumes had custard pies on them. And so it was not a scene that you could do again anyway. So fortunately we got what we wanted. And then, all the dance and everything is choreographed, obviously, and rehearsed. But out of that mayhem, it has its own energy and its own life when you do it. And you kind of, you go with it, really. The kids, by then the kids were totally and utterly uninhibited. They had no sense of being on a film set at all. This was their place, and they just trashed it, and the rest is theirs, really. It's all comes from them. It was about 12 weeks of filming, I think, 14.
Yeah, I was only there 4 days.
Oh, well, I'm looking at you as a professional filmmaker.
Oh, yes, it's 12 weeks, I think it was.
12 weeks is the norm. Most films take about 12 weeks, yeah. But it was one of those films that we had a lot of rehearsal, so because we had to do all the dance numbers that had to be choreographed and everything, and everybody had to learn the songs and things. And so we had a big rehearsal period, which is quite unusual, for probably a good couple of months before we started actually filming. So 3 months of filming, 2 months before that, and then I was preparing it for a good year before that. So in all, it's a 2-year cycle. It took about 2 years to make.